So I've got two bikes. This one's an Ibera, and this one is a Topeak. So this bike, you can see there's an eyelet for the fenders, for this kind of fender. And there's another eyelet, and that's where you could put a rack. Now with the Topeak rack, it's got these kind of large block shaped attachments, and you'll notice that if I try to get that centered over that eyelet, it won't quite work because this block is interfering with this. I could remove the screws from the fender and just put the rack over top the fender like that, but I would like to be able to make use of that other eyelet. Now with the Ibera rack, instead of having that large block that's welded to the frame, it has this spacer that goes over this screw, and then you have this amount of thread here that goes into the frame. So you can see that spacer will fit right over that eyelet. There won't be interference between it and the fender mount. The Ibera rack uses these blocks to fit onto the rack and be fastened down to the rack, and then you have this other end that fastens onto the bike frame. So the blocks fit into these grooves, and they can be slid into position as needed, and then they're secured with a fastener on the other side. And then this piece slides in, and it can be angled to some extent, but you do have interference with this bar. You can have it angled like that, or you can have it angled underneath the bar, or you could have it like this if you don't need to push it back as far into the rack. Now on some bikes you have the challenge of there not being any eyelets on this part of the frame. There's none on the outside, there's none on the inside, so it would seem that there's no way to mount these to the frame. And that's why you have to buy an aftermarket part for a bike like this, a new seat post clamp that actually has threaded inserts for the rack on the back of the clamp. So I'm going to install this. So I got it assembled loosely so that I can adjust the angle, how far back I want the rack to be angled or far forward. Usually people have it angled back just slightly. So I got it all tightened down now. This is how it sits. I think it looks good. It's got a nice stiff feel to it. And with this Ibera rack, this is their it's their PakRak clip-on system. You can buy PakRak bags that are made to clip on to this rack. It's their proprietary system. So the Topeak's got this other design of connector where you can choose which section you want to use depending on how long you need this to stick out. So I looked at the bike and I determined I need to use these end sliders. So I'm going to tighten them down loosely and then do the fine tuning later. So these metal connectors are designed so that you can bend them into place. So I've got both of those screws in there. They're not tightened down all the way. These are they're pretty good. This is not really easy to move, but there is enough looseness to it that I can push it into the place I want it to be. I've got this rack tightened down. The rack feels pretty stiff. I'm actually moving the whole bike, it's not just the rack. This Topeak rack is it's the MTX rack. That's Topeak's proprietary system for bags and baskets that actually lock onto the rack. That's what this track is for. I did order a Topeak bag, which I'm going to do a demonstration of in a later video. A question I can see coming up is, why did I install a disc rack, a disc brake compatible rack on a non-disc brake bike? There are no disc mounts on this bike. And the reason is, I just like how the disc racks space the rack away from the tire. So the bags, the pannier bags, are going to be farther away. And also, if I replace this bike with a newer bike that has disc brakes, I can just swap the rack onto the new bike.